Margaret Hughes had everything a woman in her late 20s could ask for: a loving husband, a modest but warm home in the countryside, and a career as a school teacher that gave her both stability and respect. Yet, despite all her blessings, her heart ached for one thing: she could not seem to have a child. For 5 years, Margaret and her husband Matthew had tried to conceive. Month after month, disappointment piled like stones in her chest. The cradle Matthew had built with his own hands remained empty, tucked in the corner of their bedroom like a silent accusation. Doctors offered little help, shrugging off her tears with phrases like "keep trying," or "it will happen when the time is right," but Margaret was tired of waiting. She longed for the sound of tiny feet pattering across their wooden floor, for the joy of holding a baby against her chest. It was during one of her lowest moments, sitting alone in church while the choir rehearsed, that she met her. A woman in a deep green cloak, her face shadowed, approached Margaret as though she had known her pain all along. "You wish for a child," the woman whispered, her voice like a breeze stirring dead leaves. Margaret's throat tightened. "Yes, more than anything." The woman smiled faintly. "Then come see me. There are places the doctors cannot reach, doors they cannot open, but I can give you what you seek." She slipped a folded paper into Margaret's hand and disappeared into the gathering dusk before Margaret could ask her name. On the paper was scribbled an address on the far edge of town. Matthew was a practical man, grounded in reason. When Margaret showed him the address, he laughed. "You're not seriously thinking of going, are you? These people prey on desperation. They will promise you the world and leave you poorer for it." But Margaret's hope burned too brightly to be smothered. One evening, while Matthew was away on business, she went alone. The address led her to a crumbling house at the edge of the woods. The air felt heavier there, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. She knocked once. The door creaked open to reveal the same cloaked woman from church. "You came," the woman said with a knowing smile. Inside, the air smelled of herbs and damp earth. Strange jars lined the shelves, jars that seemed to twitch when Margaret's eyes lingered too long. The woman introduced herself as Selina. "Are you willing to do anything?" Selina asked. "Yes," Margaret whispered. "I just want a child." Selina mixed a potion of thick black liquid and pressed it into Margaret's hands. "Drink this under the moonlight, and by dawn the seed of life will be within you. But remember, every door opened has its price." Margaret hesitated, but longing outweighed fear. That night she drank. And the following month, for the first time, her body bloomed with signs of pregnancy. The news filled Matthew with joy. He lifted Margaret and spun her around the kitchen, his laughter bouncing off the walls. "Finally, Margaret, finally." At first everything seemed normal. Margaret's belly grew and her skin glowed. The neighbours congratulated her. She began knitting tiny clothes and singing lullabies before bed. But months turned into a year. Then 2. By the 3rd year, Margaret was still pregnant, her stomach heavy, round and unchanging. The doctors were baffled. They conducted tests, scanned, prodded and puzzled. "We have never seen anything like this," they admitted. "The child is alive, but it is not growing as expected." Margaret's body should have given up long ago, but she remained strong, unnaturally so. And deep inside she could feel movement. Something shifted within her, slow and deliberate, like the turning of a stone. Whispers began in the village. People avoided her on the streets, crossing themselves as she passed. Children called her the woman who carried forever. Matthew tried to shield her from it, but even he could not hide his growing unease. "This isn't right, Margaret," he murmured one night. "Maybe we should go back to where it began. Maybe we should undo whatever was done." But Margaret clutched her swollen belly protectively. "No, I've carried this child too long, I will see it through." It was a stormy night when the pain began. 3 years to the very day since she had drunk Selina's potion, Margaret awoke screaming. Her body heaved with contractions, sharper and more powerful than any knife. Matthew rushed her to the hospital, rain lashing against the car windows, thunder growling overhead. Nurses gasped when they saw her chart, 3 years pregnant, and whispered frantically among themselves. Hours dragged on, the delivery room filled with sweat, cries, and the metallic tang of fear. Finally, with one last agonized scream, Margaret pushed. And silence fell. The doctor's face drained of color. Nurses stepped back, their hands trembling. Matthew stared, horror-struck, as the thing was lifted into the harsh white light. It wasn't a baby. It was a tortoise, a living, breathing tortoise, its tiny head poking from a mottled shell. Margaret fainted. The hospital tried to bury the incident, but whispers spread faster than wildfire. Some said it was a curse, others a punishment from God. Matthew refused to look at the creature. He left it in the cot by Margaret's bed, his jaw clenched, eyes hollow. Margaret, however, could not turn away. The moment she regained consciousness and saw the tortoise, something within her stirred. "It's mine," she whispered, cradling it as though it were a human infant. "My child." The tortoise blinked slowly, its tiny claws scratching against her palm. Matthew recoiled. "Margaret, that's not a child, that's a monster." But Margaret shook her head. "No, I asked for a child and this is what I was given. I will not abandon it." Her obsession grew. She named the tortoise Elliot and cared for it as any mother would, feeding it, singing to it, even dressing it in tiny clothes. Matthew couldn't bear it. Within months he left. "You chose that thing over me," he spat as he packed his bags. "Don't come looking for me when it destroys you." Years passed. Elliot grew slowly but surely into a massive tortoise, its shell dark as midnight and its eyes strangely human-like. Margaret grew older too, her hair streaked with grey, her body frail. Yet she doted on Elliot, speaking to him as though he could answer, and sometimes, she swore he did. Late at night, in the silence of her lonely home, she would hear whispers, a low voice gravelly seeping from Elliot's presence. "Mother." Margaret would jolt upright. "Elliot. Mother, you waited for me." Would you like a part 2 of this story? Do let me know in the comments down below. Drop a comment if you learnt anything from this story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share this video to your friends and family, and I will see you in my next